In 1938, hundreds of people walked out of their homes and never came back. They left everything behind. Their tools were still on workbenches, their dishes sat in cupboards. The hospital had its equipment ready for patients who would never arrive. And here is the mind-blowing part. Almost everything they left behind is still there today, 87 years later, frozen in time like it was yesterday. This is the true story of Kennecott, Alaska. It is a copper mining town where workers lived in one of the harshest places on Earth. They endured winters so brutal that temperatures dropped to 50 degrees below zero. They worked 7 days a week in darkness for months at a time. And when the copper ran out, they all left on the last train. Nobody ever returned. But the extreme cold that made their lives so miserable became the thing that saved their world. Today, you can walk through this ghost town and see exactly what life looked like in 1938. The buildings are still standing, the machines are still in place, even the paint is barely faded. This is not a museum recreation. This is the real thing. Let me take you back to where this story begins. The year is 1900. America is in the middle of a blazing hot summer. But in the remote Wrangell Mountains of Alaska, two scruffy prospectors are sweating for different reasons. Clarence Warner and a guy nicknamed Tarantula Jack Smith are climbing steep terrain near a massive glacier. They are about 200 miles from the nearest port. Their exhausted horses are struggling through rocky wilderness. Then Jack Smith spots something that should not be there. High above them, on a cliff face, he sees what looks like a green meadow. Nothing green should grow at that elevation in this barren landscape. But there it is, a bright emerald patch that looks impossible. Smith thinks maybe they have found grass for their tired horses. They spend hours climbing to reach it. What they find changes everything. It is not grass at all. The entire mountainside is covered in bright green malachite mixed with dark chalcocite. This is copper. Massive cliffs of pure copper ore. So much copper that the oxidation has turned the whole cliff face green. Smith later describes it to a mining engineer with words that would become famous. He says the copper is sticking out of the ground so much that it looks like a green sheep pasture in Ireland when the sun is shining at its best. When samples get tested, the results make geologists drop their jaws. The ore contains 70% pure copper. To put that in perspective, most modern copper mines work with ore that has less than 1% copper. This deposit is literally 70 times richer than anything being mined today. It is quite simply the most concentrated copper discovery in human history. These two prospectors have just stumbled onto a fortune. They have also unknowingly set in motion the creation of what will become America's most haunting ghost town. But finding copper in the middle of nowhere is only the beginning. The real story is about a young man who turns this discovery into an empire. Stephen Birch was born in Brooklyn in 1872. He is the second of 6 children. When his father dies, Stephen is only 10 years old. His family moves to New Jersey, where they become friends with their wealthy neighbors, the Havmeyer family. These people made their fortune in sugar refining. Mrs. Havmeyer takes a special interest in young Stephen. She helps pay for his education. This connection will change his life. In 1898, a Birch reads about the Klondike Gold Rush. He's 26 years old and stuck in a boring surveying job for the New York City subway system. Something stirs inside him. Using connections from the Havmeyer family, he scrapes together enough money for a ticket to Alaska. When Birch arrives in the remote port town of Valdez, he is not some fancy businessman. He is a civilian horsepacker. That means he hauls supplies on horseback for a United States Army expedition. It is dirty, exhausting work, but it puts him exactly where he needs to be. When Jack Smith returns from his copper discovery in 1900, Birch is there in Valdez to hear about it. He immediately understands what the other prospectors have not grasped. This is not just a lucky find. This is potentially the most valuable copper deposit on Earth. But there is one massive problem. The deposit sits in the middle of nowhere. It is 200 miles from the coast. Mountains, glaciers, and some of the most brutal terrain in North America surround it. Most people would give up right there. Birch does the opposite. He spends the winter of 1901 to 1902 personally trekking to the site. He maps the deposits. He takes samples. Then he returns to his wealthy Havemeyer connections and makes his pitch. With their backing, he buys up 21 mining claims from various prospectors. But here is where things get truly wild. To begin mining operations before a railroad even exists, Birch does something almost unbelievable. He has an entire steamship taken apart piece by piece. Workers haul it over the mountains from Valdez by dog sled and pack horse. Then they reassemble it on the Copper River. He essentially moves a ship overland through some of the most rugged wilderness in the world just to get equipment to his mine. That kind of determination catches the attention of America's most powerful businessmen. By 1906, Birch has partnered with Daniel Guggenheim and J.P. Morgan. The Guggenheim family controls most of America's copper industry. Morgan is the most powerful banker in the country. Together, they form the Alaska Syndicate. They invest over $25 million. That is equivalent to about $730 million in today's money. And this is all happening before a single ounce of copper has shipped. Stephen Birch, the former horsepacker who arrived in Alaska with almost nothing, is about to build one of the greatest mining empires in history. But before Kennecott can ship its copper to the world, it needs a railroad. The problem is enormous. The route from the mines to the coast is a 196-mile gauntlet of terror. Mountains tower on all sides. Glaciers block the path. Rivers rage through valleys. The terrain is so difficult that experienced engineers say it cannot be done. Workers nickname the proposed Copper River and Northwestern Railway the Can't Run and Never Will. They mean it as a dark joke. The man who proves them wrong is Michael J. Heaney. He is an Irish-Canadian railroad builder who has already accomplished the impossible before. Heaney built the White Pass and Yukon Railroad through similarly brutal terrain. He is a legendary figure. He started as a 14-year-old water boy on railroad crews. He worked his way up through sheer stubbornness and skill. Construction begins in 1906. The challenges are almost unimaginable. Workers lay track at temperatures plunging to 40 degrees below zero. They build 44 miles of bridges and trestles. Many of these get wiped out each spring by floods. Workers have to rebuild them. They face avalanches. Swarms of mosquitoes attack them in summer. Moving glaciers threaten to crush everything in their path. The most dramatic obstacle is Miles Glacier. It is actively calving icebergs into the Copper River right where the railroad needs to cross. The glacier is moving toward the bridge site. Some engineers believe the entire project is doomed. Haney's solution becomes known as the $1 Million Bridge. It is a 1,550-foot steel span that costs $1.4 million. Building it requires workers to dodge house-sized icebergs while working on scaffolding over frigid water. At one point, the Childs Glacier creeps to within just 1,475 feet of the completed bridge. Workers could throw a rock and hit it. Tragically, Heaney never sees his railroad completed. In August 1909, his steamship strikes an uncharted rock and sinks. He survives and leads rescue operations, but he catches a cold that develops into tuberculosis. He dies in October 1910, just months before the final spike gets driven. On March 29, 1911, workers hammer in a copper spike to mark the railroad's completion. Just 10 days later, on April 8th, the first trainload of copper leaves Kennecott for the coast. 32 railroad cars carry copper worth $250,000. The Can't Run and Never Will is running just fine. If you are enjoying this story of one of America's most incredible ghost towns, hit that subscribe button. New videos about forgotten history drop every week. You will not want to miss what happens next in this abandoned mining town. The town of Kennecott is unlike anywhere else in America. Picture a narrow valley carved between towering mountains and a massive glacier. The town stretches just half a mile long and only a few hundred feet wide. Ice and rock hem it in on all sides. Over 76 buildings fill this tiny space. They range from small outhouses to the towering 14-story concentration mill. That mill dominates the skyline like a wooden skyscraper. Almost every building is painted the same distinctive color, red with white trim. The red paint comes from a cheap byproduct of the ore separation process. It is literally the most economical option. Only one building breaks the pattern. The hospital is painted entirely white so it can be spotted instantly in an emergency. That hospital houses Alaska's first X-ray machine. At its peak, about 500 to 600 workers call Kennecott home. The company owns everything. There's a general store, a post office, a dairy that keeps small cows for fresh milk. Tennis courts exist for summer recreation. An ice skating rink provides winter entertainment. A community garden allows families to grow vegetables during the brief summer months. But this is no vacation. Life at Kennecott is brutally hard. William Douglas grows up there in the 1920s. He describes the miners' existence in stark terms. Those miners live without seeing outside air from the 1st of November to the end of March. It is cold. Workers earn $4 to $5 a day. The company deducts something like $30 a month for board and room. They are essentially captives of the company. Workers labor 7 days a week. They get only 2 days off per year, Christmas and the 4th of July. During the brutal winters, temperatures plunge to 50 degrees below zero. The sun barely rises for a few hours each day. Workers live in cramped bunkhouses. They share small rooms with up to 4 other men. The most dangerous job is working as a bucket chaser at the top of the 14-story mill. George Sullivan works this job in 1937 at age 15. He lies about his age to get hired. You have to be 16. His oral history describes the terrifying routine. Ore buckets come in one every 52 seconds. Each bucket contains about 750 pounds of ore. You catch it as it comes in. You practically run over to the grizzly and dump it down. When it is wet, you grab the great big mallet. The thing weighs about 8 pounds. You pound the bucket about 3 or 4 times. Then you take it over and put it back on the cable and send it out. Then you run back, and by then another bucket is there. You do that all day long. Sullivan works 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. He catches 750-pound ore buckets non-stop. When he returns home that fall, he is in pretty good shape. That is one way to put it. Not everyone at Kennecott lives the same way. The town has a strict class hierarchy that is visible in the very architecture. At the bottom of the hill near the crushing noise and dirt of the mill, workers live in plain red bunkhouses. They share rooms. They eat in mess halls. They have little privacy. At the top of the hill overlooking everything sits Silk Stocking Row. This is a collection of 3 elegant cottages built in 1918 for company managers. Here executives live with their families in private homes. They have indoor plumbing, proper kitchens, views of the glacier. Yvonne Connerup-Lahti lives at Kennecott as a child from 1925 to 1931. She remembers the division clearly. There is quite a difference between staff people and non-staff people. We felt that way. There are other divisions too. The workforce is a diverse mix of immigrants. Most come from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Experienced Cornish miners from England bring their expertise. Subtle tensions exist between ethnic groups. Lottie recalls a little bit of discrimination between whether you are Danish or Norwegian, Norwegian or Swedish. Perhaps the starkest discrimination involves African Americans. The steamship line that brings workers to Alaska refuses passage to black passengers. This effectively bars them from the region entirely. One remarkable story illustrates just how determined some people are to reach this remote land. George Flowers is an African-American man from the South. He travels to Seattle hoping to join the Alaska Gold Rush. When the ship denies him passage, he does not give up. George Flowers walks to Alaska. He arrives long after the gold rush ends. But by the mid-1920s, he is settled at Long Lake near Kennecott. He fishes and traps. He becomes a beloved figure among the mining families. Deborah Vickery House is a child at Kennecott. She remembers going to Long Lake and living in a little cabin and fishing in the creek. George Flowers cooks fish like no one else. He puts it all in the frying pan and cooks it. Then he turns it all over like it is one big fish cake. It is marvelous. The Kennecott Copper Corporation runs a tight ship. Drinking and gambling are strictly forbidden within the company town. Anything considered immoral gets banned. But 5 miles down the railroad tracks, a different world exists. McCarthy is everything Kennecott is not. A shrewd homesteader named John Barrett founds it. He recognizes an opportunity. McCarthy becomes the outlet for every vice forbidden up the hill. Saloons serve watered whiskey for $1. Beer in whiskey glasses costs 50 cents. A red light district of brothels operates openly along the creek banks. Pool halls thrive. Gambling dens flourish. Bootleggers do good business. At its peak, McCarthy serves more than 800 people in the area. It is a Wild West outpost in the frozen north. One old-timer famously jokes about the prices. If we got any change from a $10 bill, it is because they thought we were still sober. The relationship between Kennecott and McCarthy is complicated. The company officially disapproves, but they also need workers who can blow off steam. What develops is one of the most creative workarounds in railroad history. During Prohibition, alcohol is illegal throughout America. McCarthy's saloons keep right on operating. The challenge is avoiding federal marshals who occasionally ride the train to investigate. The solution is brilliant. Railroad engineers develop a special train whistle. It is a unique signal that tells saloon keepers a United States Marshal is aboard the approaching train. When bartenders hear that whistle, they have just enough time to hide their illegal booze before the law arrives. It is a perfect system. The marshals never catch them. Despite the harsh conditions, families live at Kennecott. Children find ways to thrive. The stories of these Kennecott kids reveal a childhood unlike any other. Inger Jensen Ricci is born at the Kennecott Hospital in 1918. Her father, Chris Jensen, is the head carpenter. Her family lives in one of the nice cottages on Silkstocking Row. Her memories capture both the magic and isolation of growing up in such a remote place. The children have remarkable freedom. They explore the glacier. They watch the aerial tramways carrying ore down from the mountains. They play games in the snow during endless winter months. Christmas is the highlight of every year. The recreation hall transforms for school programs where every child performs. Mildred Erickson Rice lives there from 1916 to 1927. She remembers the stage is only put up at Christmas time for the school children's program. Every child in school has a part in it. She is shy and it scares her to death. She always has a part in a play. They always have her sing. The community holds dances almost every Saturday night. Inger Jensen Ricci recalls they have the community dances down in the community hall a lot. In fact, it is almost every Saturday. Everybody comes, the children come and dance. Then afterwards they have coffee and cake. The 4th of July is the other great celebration. It is the only day besides Christmas when workers get time off. The whole community travels to McCarthy for races and games. The main event is an annual baseball game between Kennecott and McCarthy. The competition is so intense that the Kennecott Copper Corporation puts up a $200 prize. That is a huge sum at the time. The stakes get so high that McCarthy once imports a professional pitcher from the lower 48 states just to win. The children's memories recorded decades later at reunions in the 1990s paint a picture of a tight-knit community despite the isolation. Inger Jensen Ricci reflects on what a really tremendous place to bring up a family. Surrounded by nature and love, we children are doubly blessed. The simplicity, the freedom, and the peace of such an existence is beyond imagination. While families celebrate holidays and children play in the snow, the real engine of Kennecott runs deep underground. The company operates 5 separate mines connected by an astonishing 77 miles of tunnels carved through solid rock. These mines are named Bonanza, Jumbo, Mother Lode, Erie, and Glacier. They sit at elevations up to 6,000 feet, thousands of feet above the valley floor. Getting ore from these high mountain mines to the mill below requires an ingenious system of aerial tramways. These are essentially cables stretching for miles through the air. They carry ore buckets weighing up to 750 pounds each. Nels Connerup works as a tramline rider from 1934 to 1937. He describes the job as riding up and down the line, watching for problems that develop in the towers and the saddles and cables. You keep all of the gear on the line greased. It is a mean job in the winter and a beautiful job in the summer. Workers who operate the tramway-turned stations have to sign liability waivers. The machinery can easily crush a man's arm or head if he is not paying attention. The Bonanza and Jumbo aerial trams stretch about 3 miles long. The ride takes 45 minutes each way. It is terrifying in winter storms. Life at the mines themselves is even harder than at the mill town. At Jumbo Mine, workers live in 3 two-story barracks. Each houses 80 men. There is also a cookhouse and gymnasium. Here is the remarkable part. These buildings are constructed on top of a glacier. Only one corner of the complex sits on solid ground. James Bean Sr. works as a shift boss at the leaching plant from 1925 to 1927. He describes the difference between the valley and the mines. It is a very good place at the mill here. They treat us wonderfully well. But the people in the mine do not get down here as easy. In the winter, they are all penned up there. They come out of the mine and stay in the bunkhouse. It is almost like being in prison. Every spring, there are 50 or 60 of them that quit. Some miners develop miner's consumption. That is what we now call silicosis. It is a deadly lung disease caused by breathing rock dust. Kennecott recalls there are miners that get what we call miner's consumption from time to time. They ship them down to Arizona. Very often they have to take a collection for the fair. Despite everything, the mine makes incredible amounts of money. From 1911 to 1938, Kennecott produces over 591,000 tons of copper and 280 tons of silver. The total value in 1938 dollars is $200 to $300 million. That is equivalent to roughly $4 billion today. At least half of that is pure profit. At its peak year in 1916, the mine produces copper worth $32.4 million. It ranks among the largest producers in the nation. The ore is so pure. It averages 13% copper compared to less than 1% at typical mines. Processing it is remarkably efficient, but even the richest copper deposit on Earth cannot last forever. As early as 1925, company geologists issue a warning. The high-grade ore bodies are running out. The easy copper, the incredible stuff that runs 70% pure, is largely depleted. What remains is harder to extract and less profitable. The Great Depression makes things worse. Copper prices crash. In 1932, the mine temporarily closes for the first time in its history. It reopens for several more years. But the writing is on the wall. In 1938, the mines shut down one by one. The Glacier Mine already closed in 1929. Mother Lode closes at the end of July 1938. Then Erie, Jumbo, and Bonanza all shut down in September. The closure is both planned and sudden. That contradiction captures the human drama of Kennecott's end. At the corporate level, management has known for years this day is coming. They organize termination pay. They arrange for a final turkey dinner. They methodically wind down operations. But for the workers and families who live there, the end comes with little warning. There is only one way out: the railroad. Once the company decides to close, everyone has to leave. Inger Jensen Ricci, the woman who was born at Kennecott in 1918, has returned as an adult. She hopes to raise her own family there. She takes a job as a typist. She dreams of giving her children the same magical childhood she experienced. Then comes December 1938. The mine closes the day before Christmas. Her dream is crushed. On November 10, 1938, the final train departs Kennecott. Workers and families board the cars. They take only what they can carry. The train winds down the 196 miles of track that Michael Heaney carved through the wilderness nearly 3 decades earlier. It passes the $1 Million Bridge. It goes through the wild Copper River Valley. It reaches the port of Cordova. They never come back. And here is what makes Kennecott different from every other ghost town in America. Because there's only one way in and one way out, and because the train is never running again, almost everything gets left behind. The company takes the most expensive equipment, but everything else stays exactly where it is. Tools workers used that very morning remain on benches. Dining tables sit empty but set. The tramway cars hang frozen on cables. The general store remains stocked with goods. The hospital stands empty but fully equipped. The 14-story concentration mill with all its massive machinery sits silent against the glacier. Personal belongings fill the bunkhouses. Papers remain in the manager's office vault. For decades afterward, visitors can actually come to the general store and stock up on beans, flour, and other staples that were left behind in 1938. The railroad itself is abandoned immediately after the final run. In 1939, spring floods sweep away a crucial river crossing. In 1941, the Kennecott Corporation donates the entire right-of-way to the federal government as a public road. This extraordinary gift eventually becomes the Gravel-McCarthy Road that visitors still drive today. A single Watchman family remains at Kennecott until about 1952. They live among the silent buildings. Then, even they leave. The town becomes completely deserted. Here is where science meets history in an extraordinary way. Most abandoned towns do not stay preserved for long. Within decades, wooden buildings rot and collapse. They disappear back into the earth. Vandals take what they can carry. Weather destroys what remains. But Kennecott sits in one of the coldest and driest climates in North America. And that cold acts like nature's own time capsule. Permafrost is ground that stays frozen year-round. It underlies much of Alaska. While Kennecott itself is not built directly on permafrost, the region's brutal winters create similar preserving conditions. Temperatures regularly plunge to 50 degrees below zero. Snow buries the buildings for months at a time. The air's dry. This extreme environment preserves things in remarkable ways. At those temperatures, bacteria and fungi that would normally cause decay simply cannot function. They are essentially frozen in place. Insects that would eat through wooden buildings cannot survive. The dry air prevents the moisture that causes rot. Think of it like nature's giant freezer. Just as frozen meat stays preserved in your home freezer, the buildings and artifacts of Kennecott stay preserved in Alaska's frozen wilderness. The science is dramatic. Archaeologists working in permafrost regions have found artifacts that look like they were buried 10 years ago when they are actually 1,000 years old or more. Ann Jensen is an archaeologist who studies Arctic preservation. She explains that many organic remains can be 1,000 years old or more, but they look like they were buried 10 years ago. Leather goods, ivory carvings, wood bows, bone fragments, and even mummies freeze quickly. This slows chemical and bacterial action. Then, they never unfreeze. To understand just how powerful cold preservation can be, consider what happens in 1979 near Fairbanks, Alaska. Gold miners working in permafrost discover the frozen carcass of a bison that has been buried for 36,000 years. They name him Blue Babe. His skin has turned blue from a mineral called vivianite that forms in permafrost. The preservation is almost unbelievable. Blue Babe still has coagulated blood visible in his wounds. The wounds show he was killed by an Ice Age American lion tens of thousands of years earlier. His muscle tissue has the texture and color of beef jerky. His bone marrow is still white and greasy. His hooves remain attached and keep their shape. And here is the truly wild part. Paleontologist Dale Guthrie from the University of Alaska hosts a dinner party. He serves stew made from Blue Babe's neck meat. Nobody gets sick. The meat has been preserved so completely by permafrost that it is still edible after 36,000 years. More recently, in 2022, miners in Canada's Yukon Territory discover Nuncho Ga. This is a baby woolly mammoth that lived over 30,000 years ago. It is the first complete baby mammoth ever found in North America. Its trunk, ears, and tail are almost perfectly preserved. Scientists can still see its mummified skin and hair. These discoveries help explain why Kennecott's wooden buildings, machinery, and artifacts have survived for nearly a century. The cold acts as a preservation system that no museum could match. Today, Kennecott is protected as part of Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve. This is the largest national park in America at 13.2 million acres. It is bigger than 6 Yellowstones combined. About 50 original buildings still stand. They are painted in that distinctive red with white trim. The towering 14-story concentration mill remains the centerpiece. It is one of the tallest wooden buildings in North America. Inside the mill, visitors can see the original machinery exactly where it was left in 1938. Massive jaw crushers sit idle. Shaker tables remain in place. Ore bins wait empty. Chutes drop into darkness. The giant gears, heavy timber beams, and winding passages create an almost surreal experience of walking through industrial history. The National Park Service has invested over $20 million in stabilization and restoration. A major project completed recently stabilized floors 7 through 11 of the mill building. Workers used 141,200 pounds of lumber. Because no heavy equipment can reach this remote site, workers move everything by hand. They use winches and chain falls. Other buildings have been restored as well. The general store now houses exhibits and displays preserved shelves from the original operation. The general manager's office has been completely restored to its original form. It still contains working papers from the mine's operation. The old Blackburn School serves as the Kennecott Visitor Center. The recreation hall was rehabilitated in 2004 for community events. Walking through Kennecott is genuinely eerie. Railroad tracks still mark where the final train departed. Aerial tramway cables still stretch toward the mountains. The tailings are crushed rock left over from ore processing. They still contain bright green malachite and blue azurite. These are oxidized copper minerals. Visitors are asked not to take them as souvenirs. Perhaps most haunting is the Kennecott Cemetery. It contains about 50 grave markers from 1908 to 1938. Those buried here often died from the hazards of mining work. Many graves belong to workers whose families could not afford to ship their bodies home. There's a troubling twist to Kennecott's preservation story. The same frozen conditions that have protected the town for nearly a century are now changing. Alaska is warming 2 to 3 times faster than the global average. Since 1970, temperatures have risen by 4.2 degrees Fahrenheit. That is more than double the global increase. For Kennecott, this means real problems. The permafrost that underlies much of the region is starting to thaw. Ground that was frozen solid in 1908 when the buildings were constructed is now shifting and sinking. New ground subsidence has been documented near the old Bonanza mine. Underground workings are collapsing. The buildings themselves are feeling the strain. Structures erected on frozen ground are now sinking unevenly. The National Park Service has had to install massive beams and long steel pegs to keep the 14-story mill from sliding toward the glacier. Scientists describe the situation with urgency. Archaeologist Ann Jensen compares the loss of frozen archaeological sites to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. She says, irreplaceable knowledge is being destroyed forever. She says, the library is on fire. The Arctic Report Card for 2024 paints a stark picture. The Arctic is increasingly warmer, less frozen, and wetter. Hundreds of rivers across northern Alaska have turned orange as thawing permafrost releases iron and heavy metals into waterways. Kennecott's preservation, it turns out, may have an expiration date. Kennecott is often called America's best preserved ghost town. But what makes it truly special compared to other famous abandoned places? Body, California, is the standard comparison. It is a gold mining ghost town that became a state historic park in 1962. About 110 buildings remain. It receives 200,000 visitors annually. Like Kennecott, Bodie practices arrested decay. That means stabilizing buildings without restoring them and leaving interiors exactly as they were abandoned. But Bodie lost more than 90% of its original structures to 2 major fires in 1892 and 1932. Its industrial mining equipment is largely gone. Kennecott, protected by its remoteness and climate, kept almost everything. Rhyolite, Nevada shows what happens when a ghost town is not preserved at all. It was once home to 8,000 to 12,000 people with electric lights, telephones, and an opera house. After abandonment, rhyolite was systematically dismantled. Buildings were taken apart and moved elsewhere. Only a handful of substantial structures survive as photogenic ruins. Pripyat, Ukraine offers perhaps the closest parallel to Kennecott's frozen-in-time quality. This is the city abandoned after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. Residents evacuated believing they would return in days. They left personal belongings, food on tables, and children's toys behind. National Geographic has called Pripyat a 20th-century Pompeii. The comparison to Pompeii itself is apt. Both represent moments frozen in time. Pompeii was frozen by volcanic ash in 79 Common Era. Kennecott was frozen by economic forces and Arctic cold in 1938. Both preserve not just buildings, but the everyday details of life. Tools sit where workers dropped them. Domestic objects remain in homes. The physical reality of how people lived stays intact. What sets Kennecott apart is its industrial completeness. Most mining ghost towns lost their actual mines and mills to fire, salvage, or collapse. Kennecott kept its 14-story mill with all machinery intact. It kept its tramway systems. It kept its underground workings with 77 miles of tunnels. It kept its supporting infrastructure. The National Park Service calls it the best remaining example of early 20th century copper mining anywhere in the world. Kennecott almost did not survive at all. In the late 1960s, 30 years after the mines closed, the company that still owned the land decided they wanted to eliminate any liability for accidents. Their solution is simple: demolish everything. Work crews actually begin tearing down structures. A few buildings are destroyed before someone somewhere decides the job is not worth finishing. The demolition stops. Most of Kennecott is left standing. It is one of history's lucky accidents. If that demolition order had been completed, there would be nothing left today but rubble and memories. Instead, the site survives long enough for attitudes to change. In 1978, Kennecott is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In 1980, Congress creates Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve surrounding the old mining town. In 1986, Kennecott becomes a National Historic Landmark. This is official recognition of its national importance. The turnaround is complete in 1998 when the National Park Service purchases 2,839 acres and the major buildings for $3 million. The Kennecott Minerals Company cleans up toxic materials and donates subsurface mineral rights. Today, instead of demolition crews, conservation teams work each summer to stabilize what remains. The ghost town that nearly became a parking lot has become one of America's most remarkable historical sites. Standing in Kennecott today, surrounded by red buildings against the white glacier, visitors often feel something hard to describe. It is a sense of time collapsed, a feeling of walking through history that is not quite ended. The workers who left in 1938 expected to find jobs elsewhere. They expected to start new lives and move on. They could not have imagined that their abandoned town would still be standing 87 years later. Their tools would still be on workbenches. Their buildings would still be painted company red. They could not have known that the extreme cold they endured would become the very thing that preserved their world for future generations. Those 50-degree below zero winters and those months without seeing the sun became the preservation system that no museum could match. Nels Connerup worked the aerial tramways in the 1930s. He reflects decades later with a kind of dark amazement. Copper mining is generally safer than coal mining and things like that. But his impression from 60 or 70 years looking back is startling. He cannot imagine how they could get people to do what they did. A man would come here and work for 10 or 15 years for a net of $80 per month and live under those circumstances. The human cost was real. Workers spent winters underground without seeing daylight. They developed lung diseases from rock dust. They gave up years of their lives in one of the harshest environments on Earth. They sent money home to families around the world. Yet there is another side to the story, too. Inger Jensen Ricci was born there. She dreamed of raising her own family at Kennecott. She never lost her love for the place despite having her dream crushed. She says what a really tremendous place to bring up a family. Surrounded by nature and love, we children were doubly blessed. The simplicity, the freedom, and the peace of such an existence is beyond imagination. To live in Kennecott a lifetime would be paradise. Kennecott exists in a strange limbo between past and present. The buildings are real, but the life that filled them is gone. The machinery still sits where it was left, but no ore has moved through those chutes in nearly a century. The glacier that the miners watched every day continues to flow, though it has retreated dramatically since their time. It is visible proof of the climate change that now threatens the town's preservation. About 35 people now live year-round in the McCarthy-Kennecott area. A few hardy visitors make the journey each summer. They drive the 60-mile gravel road that follows the old railroad bed. Then, they take a shuttle or hike the final miles to the ghost town itself. The National Park Service offers guided tours of the mill building interior. This is the only way to see those original machines and catwalks and ore chutes. Visitors can explore other buildings on their own. They follow self-guided walking tours past the general store, the hospital, the bunkhouses where hundreds of workers once slept. And everywhere there is the cold. Even on warm summer days, the buildings stay dark and chilly inside. The glacier looms in the background. The mountain air carries that sharp bite that reminds you this is not a museum in some comfortable city. This is Alaska, raw and real. The same wilderness that challenged the dreamers and workers who built this impossible place a century ago. Kennecott is more than a ghost town. It is a time machine. Most history comes to us through books and photographs, filtered and interpreted. But walking through Kennecott means standing in the actual spaces where Stephen Birch plotted his copper empire, where workers caught 750-pound ore buckets every 52 seconds, where children performed nervous Christmas songs while their fathers watched from the audience. The buildings are not reconstructions. The machinery is not reproduction. The tools were not placed there for display. Everything is real, preserved by accident and climate and the simple fact that when the last train left, there was no easy way to take it all away. Climate change threatens this preservation. Every degree of warming means more stress on buildings designed for a colder world. Scientists and park rangers race against time to stabilize what they can. But for now, Kennecott endures. The 14-story mill still stands against the glacier. Its red paint is fading, but still visible. The aerial tramway cables still stretch toward the mountains where workers once extracted ore worth billions. The general store still holds echoes of the goods it once sold. The hospital where Inger Jensen Ricci was born in 1918 still watches over the valley. They are waiting, these buildings, not for the workers to return because they never will, but for visitors who want to understand what it meant to build something extraordinary in one of the world's most unforgiving places. The town that was frozen in ice, where everything is still there today, has one more story to tell. It is the story of how ordinary people did impossible things in an impossible place. Prospectors who found the richest copper on earth, engineers who built railroads through terrain that could not be crossed, workers who labored 7 days a week in 50 below zero cold, families who raised children beside glaciers and found joy in the harshest environment imaginable. If this story of America's frozen ghost town inspired you, make sure you are subscribed. Hit that bell icon so you never miss our next journey into forgotten history. And drop a comment below. Would you visit Kennecott? Could you have survived working there? Let me know what you think. The last train left 87 years ago, but in Kennecott it is still 1938, and probably always will be. The buildings stand as monuments to human determination and the power of nature to preserve what we leave behind. The aerial tram cables stretch into the mountains like frozen threads connecting past to present. The red paint still marks company property even though the company abandoned it generations ago. The glacier still flows, though it has retreated far from where it once stood. And on the coldest winter nights when temperatures plunge to 50 below, when the northern lights dance across the sky, when the silence is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat, Kennecott remains, waiting, watching, remembering, a testament to the men and women who built an empire in the wilderness and left behind a time capsule that refuses to fade away.